Hello, everyone. My name is Mariko Hayashi, and I'm going to be presenting today about the benefits of multilingualism and how fostering the development of the native language or the home language of your multilingual student can support their academic success or their success inside and outside of the classroom, I should say. This presentation is geared for any educators working with multilingual students as well as the families of multilingual students. Oh, sorry. So there's a table of contents here. I am going to add a link to this slide deck in the comments. So feel free to download it and just jump to the location of the section that you are interested in if you don't want to listen to the whole thing. I'm going to be going over a brief explanation of the demographics for multilinguals. Just so you know, lots of abbreviations. ML is always going to be for multilingual. I'm going to be using that one a lot. Then we're going to go over common approaches and programs of support that are currently in place. And the two views that are commonly taken, the additive view and the subtractive view. And then we're going to be talking about specific strengths of multilingual learners, the research behind these views that we're talking about, specific strategies, teaching strategies, and then benefits of multilingualism outside of the classroom. And I'll finish with a brief overview of language other than English programs. I did add a list of acronyms. There's lots of acronyms, so if you ever get confused, just look here. I'm going to start off with some Michigan demographics. So currently, out of the student body, 7.3% are classified as EL or English learners. However, if you look at the urban areas such as the Detroit schools, the county, the Wayne County, it jumps up to about double of that. As well as Washington County, it's about 10%. And we've been seeing a pretty consistent rise in the percentage over the last 10 years. Now, if you want to look at national demographics, I found two good sources for that. This website is linked at the bottom of the slide. This shows the national percentage or ratio of ELs, or I'm sorry, ELL, English language learners by state. If you hover over the state, it gives you some more stats about the ELs, as well as the immigrant families in that state. As you can see, the top five are actually Texas, California, New Mexico, Nevada, and Illinois. And it then shows the top 26. At the bottom, it says sort states by. You can sort it by different criteria. This is another really good source I found by the Migration Policy Organization. Um, they give you fact sheets based on your state and they break down stats for your specific state. So they have even just the first 3 or 4 pages, you're going to find some tables that have some very useful knowledge. So if for both educators and families, it's really good to have this information. I really like the one that tells you the top 5 languages spoken. So for Michigan, you see it's Spanish, Arabic, Bengali, Chinese, and Albanian. And then also ML families can be aware of what kind of communities are comprising their state. Um, at the bottom, you'll notice there's a table showing the percentage of ELs that are achieving English language proficiency. Now, as you can see, it's pretty darn low. And we're going to be talking about some reasons that it's so low. Now, to start off the subtractive view. So there's two views we're going to be going over, subtractive and additive. So the subtractive view, it's that one language is developed at the expense of another. So this follows the deficit-based view. So basically, student failure in the school is caused by internal deficits. So according to this view, being an English language learner is a deficit. It's a drawback. And native language of the student is viewed as simply a bridge to language acquisition. So you're using it to learn English. The goal is to just learn English. And it's a temporary support. So once you learn English, you don't need it, you don't use it anymore. You just want them to use English in the school environment. Bilingualism, for a good portion of the 20th century, was viewed as a source of academic retardation and cognitive confusion. This subtractive view is aligned with the maximum exposure hypothesis, which believes that basically the more time you spend learning a language, the better you will acquire it. So the idea is, again, full immersion. You just have the student or encourage them or even force them just to use English at school because you believe that that's the fastest and most effective way for them to pick up the language. So current supports follow this view. Now we've been seeing a steady increase in the rise of numbers of EL students. And despite the research, which we're going to go over after this, most ELs are likely to receive instruction solely in English, and they are less likely than before to receive extensive English learning support. And actually, 9% of all EL students do not receive any ELL support at all. Now, going over the current English language support, some common program types. So most common is the pull-out type. So this is where the teachers pull out the English learners or the multilingual learners out of the core academic classroom. They isolate them with just the EL, the English language teaching teacher, or it might be a small group of ELs with the teacher. They teach English, and the idea is that time is focused just on teaching English skills. Now, a lot of these programs are early exit. So the idea is you're trying to get them to learn English as quickly as possible within the first couple of years. Then once they got the English, you push them out of the support programs and they don't get any support after that point. Now the average English learner or multilingual learner is in these programs for about 3 years. However, research has shown that you need 5 to 7 years on average for successful language acquisition. And unfortunately, once you go to middle school and high school, most instruction is exclusively in English. So what comes out of this is, unfortunately, bilingualism isn't achieved. So in school, the multilingual learners do not achieve academic success, and a lot of them end up in remedial programs. So the dual language bilingual education programs, the ones that research have supported, that actually do end up in successful language acquisition and, academic achievement at schools. So these are comprised of 50% English language learners and 50% English speakers. And the instruction is also half and half in English, half in the other language. However, even in these programs, you see that value is placed both by the teachers and the students and the families on developing English more so than the other language. Again, native language is seen as a bridge to English acquisition. Now, this leads to the long-term result of the students losing the home language ultimately, and they just become English speakers. However, even though they can speak English, they can't really read or write in English very well or in their native language. Um, so that results into them being excluded from, social circles that include, you know, the native speakers from their native heritage background, but also um, native English speaker social circles. So they don't really find a place in either circle. And then they also find it harder to find higher paying or more fulfilling jobs. Now, switching to the additive view. The additive view views multiple languages they can develop in tandem. Now, this follows the asset-based view, which believes that the home language is an asset that you can use to build another language off of. So native language is a fundamental strength and the solid basis needed to acquire another language. The additive view follows the interdependence hypothesis, which believes that academic language proficiency can transfer across to different languages. So what that means is, any skills you have in one language, you can transfer to other languages you're using. So if you have strong literacy in your native language, that will lead to better acquisition of the second language. Now, translanguaging. This is a super important concept that has been a major focus in the teaching English language community. So if you are an educator who teaches any multilingual learners, this is a big concept that is really good to know. And hopefully your instruction will be focused around this. So what translanguaging is, you're using basically your full language repertoire, which is all the knowledge you have about language in general. So if you're a multilingual learner or you're a multilingual speaker, it's all of your knowledge about all the languages you know. And you use it to communicate or work through problems or tasks. Now, another word for your full language repertoire is unitary repertoire, which again just means all the language knowledge or skills you have put all together. And this is a concept based on the fact that, research shows languages are not isolated in the brain. So it's not like one section of your brain has your English knowledge, the other section of your brain has Japanese knowledge, and then there's yet another section that's controlling, your Spanish knowledge. You just have one section of the brain where all of your language knowledge is part of this one big system, and it's interconnected, and it all activates at the same time whenever you use language. Now, oftentimes you're going to see multilingual learners using elements of just one language. So often at our English speaking schools, we're going to see our multilingual learners trying to use just English. Now, when they're doing that, they are actively filtering the language because, again, naturally, they would be wanting to mix all of the language knowledge that they have to try to communicate. Now, if this is rare to experience because you don't often find two or more people who have the same level of knowledge of the same specific languages. For instance, I can speak Japanese. If I'm with someone else who's also fluent in English and Japanese, then we can have a really cool conversation where we mix English and Japanese throughout our conversation. You also know this concept between English and Spanish. It's called Spanglish. It's a good thing to keep in mind because that's when your brain is most free and communicate using you can communicate better because you can use all the language and all the vocab that you know. Um, so this is an important skill or concept because it allows the students to use all of their language knowledge to make meaning of their learning and of the worlds around them. Also, it allows the students to address the systems of power and control that are associated with language. Specifically, English has developed ever since colonization to be the language of power or the language that people use to hold power over the minority groups. So you can still see the effect of that in today's society, inside school and outside of school. Now, when used well, translanguaging is a transformative process where students can use it to to use and shape the identity around language. Um, Now, machine translation, I want to touch on because a lot of teachers, this can be a bit of a controversial topic. However, research has shown that machine translation can be a very good support for multilingual learners in being academically successful. Now, there are stages. If they're a beginner in learning English, they will use machine translation for survival. So basic communication of basic needs like food, needing to use the bathroom, stuff like that. Then once they're at their intermediate level, it becomes explorative. So then they can use it while doing regular tasks in the classroom, trying to understand what the task is, doing research, etc., etc. And then once they get to the advanced or high level, they can use translation much more critically. So they can compare different translation engines to see which one they think is most accurate. And they can decipher for which tasks machine translation is better equipped versus maybe machine translation isn't so great for certain tasks. And they can even possibly start developing their own tools or designs for tools to translate with. The research has shown that it does support multilingual learners' language development and it improves the quality of writing output. And when used right, it can empower both the student and the teacher throughout the learning process. Now, I want to talk about the specific strengths of a multilingual learner. There are many. I'm going to touch on two. First one being metalinguistic awareness. So a lot of this is going to have linguistic concepts in it. I want to point out that it is important for any educator to have a basic understanding of linguistics. It will really help you understand how language is structured, and you'll be able to see the differences between English and the other languages. And that awareness will really help you support your multilingual learner. So to start off with phonological shifts, so there's going to be examples listed under each of these. So for instance, the f sound in leaf changes to v for leaves. Um, Multilingual learners can notice that there's a difference in stress and emphasis in certain, such as button versus baton. They're going to notice the concept of sarcasm or rhetoric. In Japanese, sarcasm is a very unknown concept. It's used very rarely. So a Japanese student coming to the US learning English may struggle with understanding that concept. Um, Proper nouns versus pronouns. Again, in Japanese, we do not use pronouns very often. We really use proper nouns most of the time. So that's a difference that they'll notice and be aware of. Proverbs and idioms. East Asia uses a lot of these, much more so or in a different way than we do in the European languages. Onomatopoeia, mimetic words. Lots of people know onomatopoeia. Mimetic words are for words that describe the movement of things, which we don't have a lot of in English. So this is a really cool concept, but they have a lot of them in Japanese. I speak Japanese, that's why a lot of these examples are in Japanese, but we'll see other examples for the next slide. Finally, syntax. They will be able to notice a difference in syntax. This example is comparing English and Arabic. In English, we have the subject, verb, object, basic sentence structure. He kicks the umpire. However, in Arabic, the default sentence structure is actually verb, subject, object. Kicks he the umpire. So this is a really fun way to compare different sentence structures. If you ever have a lesson where you're covering that, have your multilingual learners translate the sentences and see if it's the same or different. Another strength that they have is cross-language transfer. So what that is basically concepts that are the same or similar between languages. So they can directly transfer that over. They don't have to learn it anew. Phonemes. So those are the basic sound building blocks of languages. Well, the sounds that make up all the words that we use in our language. An example, between English and Spanish, there's a 92% overlap of the sounds that we use. So most of the sounds, Spanish speakers do not have to learn anew if they're trying to learn English. So letter and sound associations. A lot of the European languages share consonant sounds. F says F, B says B, D says D. They do not have to learn the alphabet anew or the sounds that they make. Cognates. These are amazing things to leverage in the classroom. These are words that have similar sound and meaning between two languages. Example, in English we say jacket, in Spanish they say chaqueta. Now there's going to be more of these or less of these depending on the language, of course, but I highly recommend do your research because you'd be surprised. Across English and Arabic, they share more than 230. And you might think that there might be none between English and Japanese because the root of the language is so different. However, Japanese has a bunch of what we call loan words. So we do actually have a lot of cognates, a lot of words that we've borrowed from English. So if you have any Japanese speakers or any other speakers, language other than English speakers, definitely look in to see if you have any cognates and use them in your lessons. So morphemes, those are the word parts. Prefixes and suffixes are things that are shared actually amongst the European languages and other languages actually. Specifically, suffixes are very popular or commonly used across all world languages. Between English and Spanish, we share more than 25 of similar prefixes and suffixes. And then for sentence structure, roughly 40% of the world languages share the subject verb object sentence structure. So again, another thing you can leverage in the class. And this is just an example of what I was telling you about the Japanese cognates. There's a surprising number of them. So this is great to use as a word wall if you have any Japanese speakers in your class. I have a research slide here. It's very simple, but these are just noting 3 or 4 different scientific or scholarly sources that we're getting the information from. Just so you know, all of my information is based on those, and the references will be noted on the last slide. So definitely feel free to check them out. But again, the research shows teens actively use their native language to make sense of school. Your native language integration is supportive of English acquisition. The extent to which programs view a student's languages as a resource to be developed versus, so that's going to be the additive view, versus as a problem to be solved, that's the subtractive view, differentiates effective from ineffective programs. The continued development of bilingual children's two languages during schooling is associated with positive educational and linguistic consequences. And finally, English and content area instruction, as in push-in programs or in structured English immersion programs, is associated with higher long-term educational attainment. So there's a bunch more resources that basically back up the fact that supporting the development of the home language supports overall academic success and also socio-emotional success. And we'll go into that as well. So here's some teaching strategies that educators can use in the classroom to support their multilingual learners. Have students work in pairs or groups. You want heterogeneous groups, so mixing multilingual learners with native English speakers, but also if you have, depending on your mix, trying to mix beginner English speakers with advanced English speakers and give them plenty of opportunity for naturally flowing and meaningful discussion. Try to incorporate content in the lessons that are from the multilingual learner's cultural personal background, but make sure these are contextualized, that they actually fit into the lesson. Don't just throw it in there if it doesn't fit. Have students create word walls with pictures and or cognates for co-vocabulary in each unit. Just like the example I showed you of the Japanese cognate word wall. And create routines to visually classify. So like highlighting in different colors, the different types of morphemes or parts of speech when engaging with new texts. This is again a great way for your multilingual learners, in addition to your regular learners, to visualize the sentence structure as well as prefixes and suffixes and how they fit into sentences. And there are some more strategies. Encourage extensive reading. So out of all the research that I've seen, really they push extensive reading and conversation. These are going to be the core basis for, language acquisition. So encourage extensive reading by incorporating texts, and you want to use texts that support the metalinguistic awareness, which also spark interest through creative language learning. So books that rhyme are very helpful, especially for languages that use vowel sounds differently. So anything with poems that rhyme, Dr. Seuss is great for that. Or alliterations. Those are poems that all start with the same sound, or repetitive patterns. You see an example, brown bear, brown bear. What do you see? Or double meaning. I love Amelia Bedelia. That's actually my favorite book. It's a funny book and it is really good for multilingual learners to notice how certain words in English have a double meaning. Have MLs translate sentences or words during linguistic related lessons and compare the structures to increase metacognitive awareness or different morphemic or syntactic structures. So we talked about that already. And this is kind of the overall strategy that we really that the research really encourages. Encourage students to use their full linguistic repertoire, which we talked about all of their language knowledge, and semiotic repertoire. So this is basically their full language toolbox. So any tools they have. So that's going to include, translators, electronic or online translators, word walls around them, visuals, gestures, and friends that speak a similar language that they can translate for them. And you use all of that to access academic content and participate in meaningful discussions. So now we're going to talk about the benefits of fostering the native language outside of the classroom. Cognitive benefits. You see improved executive functions. So that's things like problem solving, figuring out how to prioritize things, and attention control and focus. Also, later on in life, you see a lower chance of developing Alzheimer's. As far as your socio-emotional benefits, again, we talked about this. If you can develop both your native language, if you can develop your native language, it grants you entry to a broader social circle and better opportunities for jobs. And also you can develop a stronger connection to the family and culture of your heritage. And it just gives you a stronger sense of identity um, in that way. So this is a cool thing that Michigan offers. It's called the Michigan Seal of Biliteracy. It's awarded by the state of Michigan to high school graduates who exhibit a proficiency in English plus one or other additional languages. It's made to encourage students to study other languages, but also to embrace their native and heritage languages. Um, Again, this can be used as also um, an extra positive when you're applying for jobs or for colleges. Um, so there's many ways, and in general, it just gives the family and the students pride in continuing, the knowledge of their native language. The link for this is posted at the bottom if you're interested. And finally, I included this slide at the end because I wanted to show teachers and families both that there are many options for language development, native language development in most areas. So this one is specific to my area around Ann Arbor in the Detroit metro area. But as you can see, even just doing a little research, I found 4 of Spanish, 3 of which are full immersion. And then we've got some French, Japanese, Chinese, and German schools. And another really important tool as an educator is to, really know your multilingual learners. So talk with the families, figure out what kind of outside programs or after school programs or weekend programs they're part of, Are they doing things at home to try to foster the native languages? Are they going to weekend school? Um, and let your ML families know if they're not aware of it, that these options are here. And it will help support their children to develop their native language. And in turn, that's going to help them be more successful in their regular schooling as well. But yeah, thank you for listening. I hope you were able to see the benefits of fostering and supporting the development of native language in school. Again, the link for these slides is posted in the comments. And if you have any additional questions, I highly recommend you reach out to the English language specialist teacher at your school, or feel free to contact me.